Have you ever wondered why that person just won't leave your mind? Why even as time passes, their presence remains like a gentle but persistent echo in your inner world? It's as if an invisible thread ties your thoughts to their image, something deeper than logic, stronger than circumstance. You try to distract yourself, fill the space with new stories, new voices, new goals, and yet their name, their face, the energy they carry, returns like a tide. This isn't just memory. It's not just longing. Something in your soul seems to be whispering through the persistence of this thought, and maybe, just maybe, what you're feeling is not a weakness, but a message. Comment: I acknowledge the message behind my thoughts below, if you feel this truth. Carl Jung believed that nothing happens in the psyche without meaning. When a person dominates our thoughts, it's rarely only about them. Often, they are a mirror reflecting a part of ourselves we have not yet understood or claimed. In Jungian psychology, this is known as projection, the unconscious act of placing inner content, usually unacknowledged traits, onto someone else. The person you keep thinking about might be holding a piece of your soul's story. They might be wearing the face of your shadow, or the costume of an archetype that your spirit is being called to encounter. The feelings they awaken in you, longing, admiration, confusion, pain, are not just reactions to them, but clues about you. The shadow, as Jung described, is everything within us we refuse to see, the unlived, the unspoken, the disowned. It doesn't always show up as something dark or malicious. Sometimes it appears as beauty we think we're unworthy of, or strength we've forgotten we possess. When someone haunts your mind with that strange intensity, they may be carrying your unloved freedom, your repressed passion, or your unhealed wounds. They become a living message, not to be chased or claimed, but to be read. What is it that they awaken in you? What do they embody that your conscious self cannot yet face? This is why trying to silence the thought rarely works, because the mind isn't just being distracted, it's being summoned. Summoned to heal, to remember, to integrate. The more you push the thought away, the more persistent it becomes. Not because you are weak, but because something within you is ready to grow. The person in your mind becomes a doorway, not into their world, but into your own, into the realms you've not yet explored, the parts of you waiting to be named. And once you begin walking through that doorway, everything changes, not because they change, but because you finally meet yourself. The person who keeps resurfacing in your thoughts may have very little to do with who they actually are, and everything to do with what they represent. Jung taught that we rarely encounter people as they are. Instead, we encounter them through the lens of our own psyche. When someone deeply affects us, it's not just their presence we're responding to, but the unconscious content we've projected onto them. It could be the longing for a mother's approval, the ache for a father's protection, or the desperate hope to be seen as we truly are. That one person might embody years of unsaid prayers, silent wounds, or a vision of who we wish we could be. And in this sense, they aren't just a person, they become a symbol, a mirror held up to the soul. It's tempting to dismiss these recurring thoughts as obsession or overthinking. But what if the soul is using the language of obsession because you haven't been listening to its whispers? The repeated image of this person might be a psychic alarm clock, not to chase them, but to awaken. You're being asked to pause, to ask deeper questions. What do they reflect back to me? What part of myself comes alive in their presence, even if only in memory or imagination? When someone triggers this kind of intensity in your inner world, it is almost always a sign that your unconscious is trying to show you something, not about them, but about you. Sometimes, the person we cannot stop thinking about carries our shadow. Other times, they awaken our animus or anima, the masculine or feminine counterpart that lives within us. For women, the animus may appear as the image of a strong, wise, or emotionally unavailable man. For men, The anima might show up as a mysterious, nurturing, or deeply intuitive woman. These inner images are archetypal. They are part of the collective unconscious, and when they appear projected onto a real person, we experience a deep magnetic pull, not necessarily because of love, but because our psyche sees them as a gateway into wholeness. The intensity you feel may be the call of these inner energies, asking for balance and reconciliation. Jung warned that if we do not become aware of these projections, we become bound to them. We idolize or demonize others without realizing that we are staring at our own disowned pieces. That person you think about day and night might carry the weight of your unspoken grief, your unlived joy, your deepest desires. And by seeing them clearly, by recognizing the projection, you begin the sacred act of reclaiming yourself. You realize it was never about controlling the thought, or even about being with the person. It was about the inner union the soul was begging for all along. Not every bond we feel is meant to become a relationship in the physical world. Some connections exist entirely within, and their purpose is no less sacred. When someone stays in your thoughts, it may not be a sign to reach out to them, but a signal to reach inward. Jung understood that the psyche is deeply symbolic. The people who leave an imprint on us, sometimes with just a glance, a brief encounter, or even a dream, often become carriers of meaning. They awaken something primal, ancient and unresolved. Your longing, your ache, your curiosity. These are clues, not to chase them, but to explore the landscape of your soul where that longing was born. The mistake most people make is trying to silence these thoughts with distraction or logic. But this is not a logical phenomenon. It's a spiritual invitation. The persistent image of this person is not a fixation to overcome, but a message to interpret. In the same way, dreams use symbols to speak to us. The unconscious mind projects archetypes onto others to reveal what's hidden. That figure in your mind may represent the healer you need to become, the lover you've repressed, the inner child you've neglected, or the part of your soul that longs to be seen. And the more powerful the emotional pull, the more urgent the message becomes. Jung spoke often of individuation, the sacred journey of becoming whole. And on that path, every figure that captures your soul's attention plays a role. The person who lives rent-free in your mind may not be the answer, but they might be the doorway. They might be showing you your unmet needs, the parts of you still waiting to be integrated. The ache you feel isn't always for them. Sometimes, it's for the version of yourself you abandoned along the way, the self that loved freely, trusted deeply, or dreamed without fear. They remind you of who you once were, or who you are still becoming. And so, thinking of them is not the end. It is the beginning. A beginning of inner reckoning, a call to soul retrieval, a sacred reminder that the psyche is always in conversation with us, if we are willing to listen. You may never see this person again. They may never know the space they occupy in your world. But what matters more is what they awaken. If you follow that thread inward, what starts as longing transforms into self-awareness. The obsession becomes insight, the thought becomes a teacher, and what you once saw as haunting, you now recognize as healing. When a thought refuses to leave, it's because something within you remains unfinished, a door that hasn't been opened, a lesson that hasn't yet been integrated. Jung believed that what we resist in the unconscious doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits in images, in dreams, in the faces of strangers and lovers alike. And sometimes it waits in the form of someone you cannot stop thinking about. That person becomes a messenger of the inner world, a symbol of what your conscious self hasn't yet embraced. You think it's about them, but it's really about you, your journey, your healing, your awakening. This is why emotions tied to these thoughts are often so intense. Joy, grief, desire, rage. They don't just stem from the person's presence, but from the inner storm they stir. When someone represents a forgotten part of your psyche, you'll feel it in your chest, your gut, your bones. You might feel as if you're losing control, but you're actually gaining awareness. That turbulence is the friction between your current identity and the part of you that longs to be seen. The more you avoid that confrontation, the more overwhelming it becomes. But when you turn toward it with curiosity instead of fear, something remarkable happens. You begin to reclaim your energy. The persistent thought might also carry ancestral echoes, inherited patterns, emotional legacies passed down through generations. You may be haunted by someone who reminds your unconscious of an unresolved dynamic, a parent you couldn't reach, a love that was lost before it could bloom, or an emotion your family never gave you permission to feel. Jung emphasized the importance of confronting these inherited shadows. He taught that what is not made conscious will be lived as fate, a fate that repeats through relationships, through inner turmoil, through the names and faces we can't seem to forget. But you are not powerless in this story. If someone occupies your thoughts, see them not as a distraction, but as a sacred messenger. Not because they are flawless or destined, but because your soul chose their image to get your attention. Ask yourself, what part of me do they speak to? What feelings do they summon that I usually avoid? What do I envy, admire, or fear in them? These questions are not about the person. They are about the self that is ready to awaken. And when you begin answering them honestly, the grip loosens, not because the thought disappears, but because the message has been heard. Have you ever thought of someone, and suddenly they call? Or you see their name in a book, hear a song that feels like it was written for your story, or dream about them on the very night they were thinking of you too. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence not bound by cause and effect, but by resonance. These are not random events, they are soul signals. When someone persists in your mind, and your external world begins to reflect their presence in uncanny ways, it might be a sign that an invisible dialogue is taking place, not just between you and them, but between you and your deeper self. But synchronicity is not always a sign to act. Often it is an invitation to become more aware. The universe mirrors the contents of your unconscious, showing you what's unresolved, unspoken, or unclaimed within. The person you keep thinking of may not re-enter your life physically, but they have entered your spiritual life profoundly. They may represent a crossroad in your soul, a choice you once made, or a version of yourself you still long to become. These signs, these moments, are not accidents. They are part of a cosmic pattern, one that only becomes visible when you stop running and start reflecting. Sometimes these connections arrive as catalysts. They appear to activate transformation. They stir up what's been dormant. They bring everything to the surface, the love, the wounds, the questions you've been too afraid to ask. But not all catalysts are meant to stay. Some people enter your life like comets, blazing, unforgettable, and brief. Their role is not to stay, but to awaken, to remind you of what you once buried, to show you what you still need to feel. And when they leave, or even if they never physically arrive, the real journey begins, not toward them, but toward the part of you they illuminated. So, if you're thinking about someone constantly, and the signs seem to follow you, don't be so quick to call it fate. Instead, ask what fate is trying to teach you. Ask what part of your unconscious is speaking through their image, their memory, their echo in your dreams. Because even if they're far away or completely unaware, their presence in your mind is sacred, not because of who they are, but because of what they help you remember. The soul doesn't cling to people, It clings to symbols, and the person you can't stop thinking about may be the symbol your soul chose for you to awaken through. When someone lives in your thoughts, uninvited and unshaken, it's easy to assume you're trapped. But Jung would tell you that you're being called not toward the person, but toward wholeness. The inner world is a living realm, and every face that appears in it carries a purpose. That lingering figure may be the embodiment of your forgotten truth. Not a soulmate to possess, but a soul symbol to understand. And when you listen, truly listen, you realize it was never about returning to them, but about returning to yourself. The parts of you that still hurt, still hope, still hunger, they rise when that image rises. And through reflection, through awareness, through love, you begin the sacred work of healing them. True liberation does not come from forgetting the person. It comes from remembering who you were before the projection. It comes from seeing the story behind the story, the narrative your unconscious has been quietly weaving through every thought, every flash of memory, every emotional wave. Jung taught that individuation, the journey of becoming whole, always brings us face to face with symbols that unsettle and awaken. And one of the most powerful symbols is another person. When they live inside your mind, it's not because they are meant to complete you, but because your soul is asking to complete itself through the message they bring. This is the gift of deep, reflective inner work. You begin to see the one who haunted you not as a ghost, but as a guide. You reclaim the qualities you projected, the love, the strength, the freedom, the voice, and you bring them home. You no longer see them as holding what you lack, but as revealing what you've forgotten. The obsession softens, the ache transforms. The thought, once a torment, becomes a teacher, and in this quiet inner reunion, you begin to walk lighter. Not because they disappeared, but because you integrated the part of you they once mirrored. So, now, if someone won't leave your thoughts, don't rush to erase them. Sit with the symbol, listen to the message, let it transform you. And remember, your soul never wastes a thought. Every persistent image, every recurring name, every emotional tug is a map leading you back to the self you are still becoming. The person in your mind may never change, but you will. You already are. And in that transformation, you no longer need to hold on, because you have finally learned how to hold yourself. If you've made it this far, drop a 100 in the comments. It shows you are part of the 1% that's improving every single day.